What's up, guys? Eli here for my top 15 of 2022. I didn't bring any props, so I'm not going to show you anything, and which is fine because honestly, I think there's 3 or 4 that I actually haven't picked up yet, physical copies. But there's kind of a story to my list this year, as you guys might have noticed. I've never really done a traditional list in the past. I've always done this thing, at least for the last 2 or 3 years, where I would rank, and it's kind of fun. I would rank all the new releases that year that I bought. I would just rank them all against each other. And honestly, I don't know, I might do that again next year. I might not. I'm not sure. But decided to do a more traditional list this year. And so it kind of went like this. I spent the first, 10 months of this year there was a couple albums I was anticipating and, had to have. But I spent most of the year listening to older stuff, older releases that I picked up, older metal, albums that I hadn't had before, and a lot of '70s prog stuff that I'd never had before. And I was focused on the past. Didn't really want to, focus much time on the, on the present. But I spent like the last month and a half listening to almost exclusively 2022 releases, and I gotta say, I feel a little bit invigorated, compared to the last few years. I kind of feel the fire again, I guess you could say. I actually want to start paying closer attention to, to new releases. So I'm hoping that I stay consistent with that, and I'm actually looking forward to, what comes out this year, as to where the last couple years, other than a handful of albums, I really didn't give a shit. So anyways, I got 15, and I'm gonna do a couple. I guess I'll do a couple honorable mentions. I have this thing where I don't like honorable mentions because most people, they'll do like 10 albums and then 5 honorable mentions. I'm like, dude, you just did a top 15. Just call it 15. But I'm just going to do 15 albums, then I'll talk about bands that I really like, that put out albums that, maybe I just didn't get around to listening to enough. Because that was kind of a problem. I was kind of under a time crunch. Because like I said, a lot of these albums I really didn't get to listening to, until like the last 6 weeks. So take this list with a grain of salt, if you will. And again, these are just the albums that I enjoyed the most as I heard them. I mean, some of them I just listened to more than others. So I mean, I think if I were to listen to all these throughout, let's say, the next 6 months or something, I think the list might be vastly different. But these are fun to do, and here we go. Number 15, we have the solo album by Simon Phillips with Protocol 5, I believe it's called. It's called Protocol 5. So Simon Phillips is a world-renowned drummer, one of the best drummers this world has ever seen, literally. One of my favorite drummers. The guy can play anything, rock, fusion, you name it. You metalheads might know him as the studio drummer for the 1977 Sin After Sin by Judas Priest. He was like 19 years old at the time, but he's gone on to do all kinds of stuff. Lots of solo work, lots of session work. He was in Toto, I think, for 10 plus years. He just seems like a hell of a guy, but I love his drumming. There's nothing this man can't do. So these Protocol series solo albums that he's been doing, going back years and years and years, and maybe even decades, I'm not actually very knowledgeable with his solo work. In fact, this is the first Simon Phillips solo album I've checked out, and I loved it. So this is a jazz fusion album, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a noob to the jazz fusion world, but that's what my ears hear, and I don't have a lot to say about it. I'm not the right person to talk in depth about the album, other than it just was kind of a breath of fresh air, for someone who I haven't heard a lot of jazz fusion, but I'm kind of getting into it. And somebody, who listens to mostly metal and prog and stuff, it was just kind of something that I'm not used to hearing. I don't know. I don't know if it's a great album of that style. I couldn't say, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I didn't really even get to this album until I think a couple weeks ago. So I wanted to rank it higher, but I decided to put it at number 15 just to be fair, to the other albums that I actually listened to quite a bit more. But Simon Phillips, Protocol 5. Check it out if you're a fan of fusion, or even if you're just a fan of prog that's kind of, stretching your wings a little bit. Check it out. Number 14. Now, this was one of the biggest shockers for me this year. The new Balfour album. Well, these are all new, but I'm going to say the new album a lot, so get used to it. Balfour with The Devils. This album took me by surprise. I like Balfour a lot. I've listened to them for a long time, like 20 years. But I will say their last album was pretty damn good. That one kind of reinvigorated them. At least I felt like, and I was reinterested again. Their 2 or 3 albums before that, though, I just felt, I don't know, something didn't work for me. I thought they were kind of boring, a little bit too melodic. But this album, on par with that last one, I think maybe even better. The songwriting here is just so good. To me, you know, Balfour are sounding fresh. They're sounding, God, they're just. I don't want to say they're sounding like a different band, but they're just sounding like they're on fire. The songwriting here, like I said, is just, it's just really good. I don't know how to put it into words. It's just, you know, every time I listened, I figure like, all right, it's going to wear on me. This time I'm not going to like it as much. And I just liked it more every time I heard it. So Balfour, The Devils, number 14. Number 13, we're going with Storm Ruler with Sacred Rites and Black Magic. Storm Ruler are a U.S. kind of melodic black metal band. They've only been around for a couple of years. I bought their debut and liked it quite a bit. I felt like it was kind of a sleeper. Didn't really hear anyone talking about it. I'm hearing a little bit more talk about this one, but still not that much. You know, they're on Napalm Records, so I think they're going to get more attention. And it's just killer melodic black metal. If you like stuff like Dissection and Dark Funeral, this should be right up your alley. Riff writing and songwriting in general is just stellar. I think they took it a couple of steps beyond their first album. This album, I just found this to be addictive. One of the best, you know, melodic black metal albums I've heard in a couple of years, which is awesome, especially coming from a band that you know, not a whole lot of people really seem to know about. So definitely check out Storm Ruler. Check out both albums. I mean, if you like melodic black metal, if you like Dissection, you know, if you like a lot of that Swedish stuff, I think you'll dig them, man. I can't possibly see why you wouldn't. Number 12, we're going with Midnight, Let There Be Witchery. This is their 5th album. They're still signed to Metal Blade Records. I have loved Midnight ever since, honestly, since the demo and EP days, before there was a full-length album. And it's just one of those bands. I think it's because I've always been a big Venom fan. I've always loved Midnight. Everything they've done, to me, has been awesome. I may feel like maybe around the 3rd album, maybe even the 2nd album, I feel like, I don't want to say my interest waned, but I felt like the material started to become a little bit less strong, at least in my opinion. And their last album was really good, kind of a step up, and I think this one is even a step up above that album. So this is some of the best stuff Midnight has done. And if you like Venom, if you like Motorhead, if you like real dirty, you know, new wave of British heavy metal stuff, I see no reason why you wouldn't like Midnight. They're just one of those bands that I feel like could and should appeal to so many different metal fans. You know, even if you're like, you know, even if you're a black metal guy, a lot of the black metal people love them, and I very much consider myself a black metal guy. So Midnight, you can't go wrong with them. But this album, I think, was a step above in quality. Number 11, Omen Filth, Possessed by the Pentacle Spell. This is their 4th album. They are a band out of the Philippines, black metal band. Another band that I just feel like are sorely overlooked, and I'm trying to change that because, goddamn, they're so good. I've been into them, I think, since their 2nd full-length album. And this album, I think, is some of their strongest stuff, maybe even their strongest album. I feel like it was a little stronger than the album from a couple of years back, although that one was, you know, it was pretty good. Yeah, if you like black metal, just in general, I don't see why you wouldn't like Omen Filth. I'm getting a lot of like early Immortal vibes here, you know, like 2nd and 3rd album Immortal. So if you like, you know, frosty, cold, slightly dissonant riffing, you know, just killer black metal, check out Omen Filth. Check out the album from this year, and then work your way back. Check out all of their stuff because it's really fucking good. Number 10, we're going to go with the self-titled album from Artificial Brain. This is their 3rd album. They're a technical death metal band out of the U.S. For some reason, I've been onto them since their debut, from what I remember. And I've always thought they were pretty cool, but I've also thought that they're not really my cup of tea. But for some reason, this album just really struck a chord with me. I really, really dig it. Might be because I'm kind of, I guess I'm more open to, you know, that type of technical death metal. It's not something I'd want to hear all the time, or at least I should say I wouldn't want to hear a whole lot of bands like this. But I think they're one of the best, and I definitely have room in my, you know, listening rotation or whatever you want to call it for a band that's this good. If you like Demolich and stuff like that, if you like Blood Incantation, Artificial Brain are quite a bit more technical than Blood Incantation, so maybe leaning more towards the Demolich style. But and for technical death metal, I got to say, as I'm listening to this album, like, this is really unique stuff. Like, these aren't just rehashed riffs that I've heard from other tech death bands, and it's just they just kind of have their own flavor, and I got to give them credit for that. So I did not think this album would make any kind of a list for me, but I really, really enjoyed it. In fact, I look forward to listening to it more, and I'm gonna go pick up their other albums, because I don't have any of the early stuff. So I think I'm a fan now. Number 10, Artificial Brain. Number 9, we got Summerlands, or is it Summerlands? There's only one M. Summerlands or Summerlands with Dream Killer. This is their second album. They are a traditional heavy metal band out of the U.S. I'd heard the name before. I never bothered to check them out, because I'm going to be honest, 9 times out of 10, younger, newer, more traditional style heavy metal bands just don't do anything for me. Not to sound like a snob, they're just always. I always feel like there's something missing, and it just does not click. Even though traditional heavy metal is, at my core, it's my favorite style of music. But yeah, most of these, post 1990 bands, I hate to sound like that fucking idiot, but they just don't work for me. But I decided to check out this album because I heard a lot of good things, and I loved this album literally from the first 10 seconds. It's killer. Excellent vocals. Turns out I've heard this singer before. He was in that doom band Magic Circle. I have one of their albums, and I actually really like it. Guitar-wise, dude, there's some killer guitar playing going on here, especially in the solo department, but the riffs too. The solos kind of remind me of like early Chris DeGarmo, Queensryche, and even a little bit of early Andy LaRocque from King Diamond, and that's some high fucking praise right there. Unlike most newer traditional metal bands, they actually sound like they're from the 80s, but without trying to sound 80s, without trying to sound retro. There's none of that retro schlock going on here. This just sounds like traditional heavy metal, from its best era, which would have been the early 80s, and it sounds like it would have slid right in next to bands like Queensryche. So yeah, Summerlands, someone correct me on that. Killer. I gotta check out their first album now too. Number 8, we have Never Surrender by Destroyer 666. I know some people are gonna shake their heads at me for that, but I don't know. They're one of my favorite bands and have been for a long time. Of course, I can't get behind everything that Keith has ever done or said, but I've been a fan for this long. It's like, unless he does something absolutely ridiculous, I'm having a hard time jumping off board. Is that a thing? But anyways, this album, awesome. I like everything they've ever done, and this continues in the vein of the last album, where it's more just more traditional heavy metal, more classic speed metal. They've almost shed all their black metal elements that they've had, that were a big part of their sound in the mid 90s. And normally I'm not a fan of when bands that I love kind of shed an integral part of their sound, but with this band, it just fucking works, man. I'm hearing a lot of classic speed metal, Running Wild, Exciter. What else am I hearing? Well, I'm hearing also some originality. Of course, their own brand of songwriting and riff writing, everything, of course, is there. There's nothing about this, kind of like the Summerlands album. There's nothing here that sounds kind of pretentious or trying to be something that they're not. This sounds like an album that could have easily came out in 1983, 84, and it's absolutely killer. I'm having a hard time comparing it to their last album, because that one was so goddamn strong, but I'm also having a hard time saying that I like it less or that it's not as good. So another absolutely killer album from Destroyer 666. As always, I look forward to what they do in the future, and we'll see. They got a lot to live up to, but they continually live up to it. So. Number 7, we have Abhor, black metal from Italy with, I gotta look at my phone for this one, Sex, 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 Ceremonia Daemonis Antichristi. This album came out on, I believe, Iron Bonehead Productions. Just more killer black metal from one of the best black metal bands out there. One of the most underrated. They've been around since the mid-90s. They play a type of very occult sounding black metal, but occult like, not like the recent occult black metal bands, but more like early Masters Hammer, early Root. You can even hear what else? Mortuary Drape, maybe. So I guess they sound very Italian, and it's just right up my alley. Lyrics about occultism, witchcraft, stuff like that. You even hear elements of like, what would you say, like some of that Italian doom stuff from the '80s. Just that kind of Italian occult vibe that only Italians seem to be able to do, and I just love it. I can't get enough of that kind of stuff. I've loved everything I've ever heard from this band, and honestly, I think they're actually only getting better. Their later albums, I think, in my opinion, are better than their early albums, and that's a rare thing. So, if any of that mumbling sounds like something you would like, look into Abhor. Dude, they are sorely, sorely underrated. One of the best black metal bands out there right now. Number 6, Immolation, Acts of God. I hate to play favorites. I don't want to be one of those people that makes a list of whatever their favorite bands put out an album that year, automatically makes their list without even really needing to hear it. I don't want to be like that, but Immolation are one of my favorite bands. But I have criticized them in the past when they have put out albums that I have liked a little bit less. So I'm not, my favorite bands are not above criticism from me. And this album, killer. They are on a hot streak right now. I think I might like Atonement a little bit more. Atonement from a couple years back. This is kind of along the same lines as that album. That being not a bad thing at all, because they're on top of their game. Let's be honest. I mean, for a band that's been around since the late '80s, it's just, they should not be as good as they are right now, but they are, and we all need to worship them for it. So Immolation, Acts of God, another great Immolation album. One of their better albums, just in general. Number 5, we got Voivod with Synchro Anarchy. I'm a massive Voivod fan, as you might have caught on by now. One of my favorite bands. Again, I'm not putting them on here just because of that. I wasn't the biggest fan of The Wake, which I really need to go back and revisit that. Like, I need to go back and listen to that a bunch of times, because so many people who I know for a fact are huge Voivod fans worship that album, and for some goddamn reason, it just didn't sit with me as well as it did for some. So, so The Wake would not have made my top 5. So I'm not playing favorites here. I think this album really is that good. It's a little bit more stripped back than The Wake, a little bit more rockin', a little bit more metal, a little bit more less of those kind of psychedelic-y, soft moments that The Wake had that I liked, don't get me wrong, but this one's more straightforward, a little bit more of a punch to it. This is just Voivod, playing their crazy style of progressive metal, fairly straightforward, but still very techy and very sci-fi sounding. They have two members. Well, they don't have 2 new members. One of them, it's Chewy, their guitar player, has been in the band for fucking. He replaced Piggy, so I think he's been in the band over 10 years. But they got another. I want to say a new bass player, but Rocky. When did Rocky join? I think he's been in the band a while too. Anyways, it doesn't. All I'm trying to say is, this band has incorporated, 2 members that were not original members, but just fit seamlessly into their sound. So Voivod, they really know how to pick the right guys, is what I'm trying to say. I can't really stop listening to this. This is probably my favorite Voivod album in a while. I really liked Target Earth. For some reason, I prefer Target Earth to The Wake. I don't know why. I think I might like this more than Target Earth. So if you're a Voivod fan and you didn't get this album, go get it now, because you're messing up. Number 4, there should be no surprise, Satan with Earth, Infernal. I have so many good things to say about Satan, but not just now, but all the time. They came out of the new wave of British heavy metal in the early 80s. They had 2 great albums before kind of going through some weird, band changes and all that. But at some point, they actually left music. Well, at least they I don't know if they left music. A lot of those guys were in other bands. They didn't leave music, but they didn't do Satan for like 25 years, I think. They came back and 10 plus years ago at this point, but they've had 4 albums now that are literally some of the best, 4 of the best heavy metal albums in a long, long time. I literally cannot say that about, at least out of the bands I like. I can't say that about one other band. They're putting out better albums than Maiden, better albums than Priest, Queens of Reich. They're making all those guys look bad, and I'm not exaggerating. They sound like prime new wave of British heavy metal still, even after their 4th album in a row. They've been so good. I don't know. I would have a hard time ranking those 4, but honestly, this could be their best album. It's just that goddamn good. This is the traditional heavy metal album of the year, if not of the last couple years. If you're a fan of old style metal, NWOBHM stuff, any of that. If you're not into the modern Satan stuff, you're big time fucking up. Number 3, we got Negative Plane with The Pact. This is their, I think this is their, 3rd full-length album? They've been around for pushing 20 years, something like that. Maybe not quite 20, but, they're one of those bands that kind of have sometimes large gaps in between releases. I think it had been 7 or more years since their last album. And so you never, with bands taking breaks like that, you never know what you're going to get because, people grow in long periods of time like that. They grow apart, they grow in different directions. And this album does sound, it still sounds like Negative Plane, but it has its own original sound in their discography. I think it could easily be the best thing that they've done. This time, they're looking at more of a old 80s, kind of almost like 80s Italian horror movie drenched black metal, occult black metal. I guess you could probably put this next to that Abhor album as far as like atmosphere and style. I think you could, I wouldn't say that they sound super alike, but I think if you like one, you'd like the other, and that's probably why they're both on my list. This one is maybe even more up my alley, a little bit more than their last, maybe all the other stuff that they've done. I enjoyed the hell out of this album. I couldn't stop listening to it. Just that cool, goblin, like a little bit of goblin vibe. I wouldn't say, I'm not trying to say like it's progressive, but it just has that dusty, musty Italian occult atmosphere. Think like Black Hole, bands like that. I wouldn't really say this sounds doomy necessarily, but maybe a little bit. It's just killer occult black metal done the way that I like occult black metal. It's awesome. I could, if they want to continue exploring, this style, whatever you want to call it, I'm definitely on board. I think they are right now one of the best black metal bands out there. If you liked that last Mallow Carpetan album, you could probably sit that next to this one as well. So, fucking stellar. Number 2, Marillion, An Hour Before It's Dark. I'm kind of a new Marillion fan. I've had one of their albums I've had for a couple of years now. I'm kind of just slowly picking up their older stuff. I have like 3 of their older albums now, and Scott Wilcox sent me their last 2 because I had not heard anything they've done past like 1982. So I haven't heard anything with their current singer Steve Hogarth. I say current, but he's been in the band decades at this point. I absolutely love this album. This almost rivaled my number 1. That's how good this is. This is exactly what I would want. My favorite prog bands of the 70s. This is what I would want. I would hope that they would sound this good in 2022. Let's face it, a lot of them, if they were still around, they probably wouldn't be doing this. If Genesis were still a band, they wouldn't be putting out an album this good. I firmly believe that, and I love Genesis. You guys probably know that. So I've said this a couple times, and I don't know if there's any accuracy in it. I haven't really heard a whole lot of music like this because it's so unique. It kind of reminded me of that Nick Cave album Ghosteen from a couple years back. That kind of very personal vibe, just super powerful and personal. That's just the word that comes to mind for some reason. I'm getting vibes like that. I've never gotten vibes like that from another record other than that Ghosteen album. And I don't know Nick Cave very well, but that album kind of blew me away. And this album did the same thing. Would I call it progressive? I guess I would. Yeah. This is not any kind of straightforward rock music or anything like that. It's just very unique. It's awesome. I don't know how to compare it. I can't compare it to their previous albums because I haven't heard any, like I said, anything they've done since like 1982, and it doesn't sound like that. So I think it's awesome that they are this good, this far in their career. So number 2, Marillion, An Hour Before It's Dark. If you like deeply personal and powerfully emotional sounding music, I think even if you're not a big prog fan, maybe check it out. My number 1, drum roll please. This might not be much of a surprise to some of you if you followed me via Instagram, or if you've watched watched some of my videos over the last 6 months or so. This might not be a big shocker, but I'm going with Devin Townsend, Lightwork / Nightwork. This is what was one of my most anticipated albums of the last, not only of this year, but of the last probably 4 or 5, maybe longer, and it did not disappoint. I feel like even with the bonus disc, there is not one track of filler on here. I like all of them. Sure, I like some songs more than others, but there's zero filler on here. There's nothing I would ever skip, nothing that I would remotely call filler. There's not one song that if I play both discs, I'm going to be like, let's just wait till this one's over, or maybe kind of zone out until it's done. Because I usually don't skip songs, but even if I did, I would not skip anything on this album. Those 3 singles that he slowly released over the last couple of months, those are some of the best songs on the album. There's nothing wrong with that. Why not pick your strongest songs as singles? But there are some others, some deep cuts that are amazing. I'm a Devin Townsend fan for life now. And again, if you followed me recently, you'll know that I haven't always been a Devin Townsend fan. I'm kind of like a newer convert, and for me to become a fan of someone and be into their material this quickly, I mean, that almost never happens. So now that the year's up and I'm done listening to new releases, I'm actually going back to what I was doing a couple of months ago, and now I'm back on the Devin Townsend catalog because he's got a lot of music. So I'm back on that. I'm trying to slowly digest those albums so I can make more videos out of them, like the one that I've already done. That is not the type of thing that I can rush, so I don't know when the next one will be. I'd say it's probably at least a couple of months out, because what I'm doing is I'm picking albums of his. I am kind of going. I started from the beginning, and I'm going forward, but I'm only making videos out of the albums that are really resonating with me. So, for example, I've listened to 2 of his earlier albums so far. They just aren't really resonating with me at the moment. I think it's because I'm really loving his current sound so much, and I'm comparing it to that, which is unfair, but we can't help the way that our minds compute things. And so I'm not going to talk about those yet. I'm just kind of moving on, and I'm spending time with each album, and as I absorb them and as I feel like I have things to say, like I have about some of the albums I've talked about, then I'll make a video. So I just listened to Transcendence the other night and absolutely loved it. Even on the first listen, this is a top 4 or 5 for me in his catalog so far. So that might be one of the first ones I'll be talking about. But anyways, guys, that's my list. And like I said, keep in mind, I didn't spend as much time as I should have with a lot of these. I didn't even listen to a lot of releases that I should have. So just, take this with a grain of salt. But lists are fun to make. And there's a lot of bands that I've liked for a long time that put out albums that I just didn't listen to enough. Deathspell Omega, Bluedos Nord, Goat Horde, Dark Throne, Exhumed, old heavy hitter bands like that. I feel like I'm leaving one out, but I'm probably leaving a few out. I will say, I don't focus on negativity on this channel, but the two albums that were two of my favorite bands that let me down this year, Ghost with Impera. I listened to the hell out of it, and I will admit I do like it a little bit more every time I hear it, but upon like the fourth or fifth listen, I just started to not want to hear it anymore. I'm like, all right, this is an okay album, but I don't know if I'll ever listen to it again. I probably will at some point. And my problems are basically, they still have dark lyrics. That's the day Ghost starts writing lyrics that are not dark and occult type stuff, then that's when they can't be Ghost anymore. So the lyrics are still dark and clever like they always have been, but the music isn't dark anymore. I'm sure it's sort of dark, but it's just, there's a darkness that is missing from their music, and it's bugging me. And I did not like this album, and I've liked all their other albums. Candlemass, also the new Candlemass. I'll admit I've only heard it twice. The first time I was completely fucking underwhelmed. Second time I was like, all right, this is okay, but it's just to me, it's Candlemass by the numbers. It's not that good. It's maybe their weakest album ever, and I hate to say that. It still sounds like Candlemass. Everyone sounds good. Everyone sounds on point, blah, blah, blah. But it just doesn't sound inspired. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think. Feel free to tell me what your top 10, 15, 20, 50, whatever. If there's albums you think that I missed and you think that I should hear, go ahead and throw me a couple of recommendations. Please don't recommend like 20 albums to me. But, you throw me 2 or 3. That's the best way for me to check something out. Best way is just to recommend one album at a time, because I'll just feel overwhelmed and I'll just forget about everything entirely. But yeah, talk to me about what you liked. What do you think about my list? Not that it matters. We all have lists. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about it. But I hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you had a good, whatever holidays you celebrate or don't celebrate. Hopefully you spent time with family and took some time to sit back and breathe a little bit, enjoy life. You only get one go, guys. Try to enjoy it as much as you can. So anyways, I'll be back soon. I think my next video will hopefully be part 1 of my Australian metal retrospective that I'm working on. It's been a lot of fun. Australia is hands down one of my favorite countries for metal, and yeah, this video, I'm in the writing process. I haven't recorded anything yet, but that part's pretty easy. Yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you any Aussie metal fans out there, I can't imagine there wouldn't be, because it's not only is it one of my favorite countries for metal, but it's just one of the best. Common knowledge. Louis says hello. He's glaring at me like always. But thanks for stopping by, guys, and we'll talk soon. Fucking cheers.